Hello, everybody. It is Saturday night, UFC Vegas 17. The last card of 2020 is in the books, and I have some instant reaction for you. My name is Luke Thomas. I am one half of the Morning Kombat duo. Brian Campbell, of course, will join me on Monday to give his full reaction to everything we have here tonight. We'll also talk about some of the things on that Monday show that I won't quite get to today, but right now, in this moment, the fights have just ended. UFC Vegas 17. Stephen Thompson versus Geoff Neal. We'll talk about Jose Aldo versus Chito Vera as well. So what happened? What can we say about it? First things first, please hit that subscribe button. Really appreciate that when you do. And of course, give the video a thumbs up. Okay, the results are in. A lot to say. Let's get to it. One quick programming note. I think I forgot to say at the top there, but Brian Campbell will also have an instant reaction tonight. He should have one for the Canelo Alvarez fight, so be on the lookout for that. But okay, let's stick to MMA here for just a second, and let's get to this. So, if you don't want spoilers, your chance to leave was already. Let's get to them now. UFC Vegas 17, the last card for the UFC in 2020, of course, took place at the UFC Apex. Your main event, Stephen Thompson defeating Geoff Neal 50-45 across the board. It was not close. It was not close at all. And it was not close even in a situation where, both fighters had a cut from an inadvertent clash of heads. But, to say it was dripping in the eyes of both, maybe a little bit more so being bad for Neal than it was for Thompson. But still, there was this sort of circumstances there that didn't make it ideal for either one. It appeared that Thompson had some kind of I think it was a right knee issue or maybe a foot issue. And that was much more apparent in the fifth. You could see him grimacing. He was talking to about it with his corner in between the fourth and fifth round. So it wasn't a perfect performance from him in the sense that everything went according to plan. I don't think anyone ever plans for injuries. But in terms of the difference in skill, it was not close. It was not close at all. The score sometimes, I think the scores I have to look this up to be sure, so don't kill me for it, but I think the scores in the fight between Holloway and Edgar, I think it was like 49-45 or 49-44, whatever it was, 49-46 maybe. Where you're like, oh, well, the guy won basically all the rounds except one. But that fight was pretty close in each consecutive round. It was just that Holloway did just enough in those rounds, to edge him out, and then it accumulates over time. So you can get a wide disparity in the numbers, and then it doesn't necessarily reflect how competitive it was. It does here. It does reflect how competitive it was. I mean, Geoff Neal, obviously was dealing with some medical issues prior to all of this, and, coming back could not have been easy, and, we can go on and on about this. But you heard Stephen Thompson. He had a year-long layoff. He had broken both of his hands in his last contest. It wasn't like he had been riding some kind of, massive streak of momentum. Plus, he's 37, soon to be, I think, 38 years of age. So why was there such a discrepancy? Well, basically it goes like this. Neal just couldn't get his hands on him. There were moments there where he was able to corner him and unload with some combinations. That worked on occasion. There were times a little bit later in the fight where, Thompson would bite down on the mouthpiece and exchange with him a little bit. So he was able to land, to a degree in that way. But in general, he just couldn't find the target. Wonderboy was in the small cage here. Remember, this was at the Apex, not Fight Island, so you're dealing with a significantly smaller cage. And nevertheless was able to just get it done. He was able to split Neal's timing constantly. So Neal would be in between steps or in between strikes, and Wonderboy would hit it, not on the beat, but on the half beat, right, in between all the strikes. And then he was able to use that to change angles, to change lateral movement if he was going from one direction to the other, or if he just wanted to turn on an angle and then follow it up with another punch, turn on an angle and then follow it up with a kick, and then do it again in split timing so you could let the split timing build on itself. He was doing a lot of grabbing the lead wrist, using that to step around. He was going one way and then juking the other. So he had all these tricks where not tricks, there's no skills really. He has all these skills between the timing split and the hand grabbing of the wrist. Sometime later in the fight, you'd see him smash in with an elbow, so he's changing weapons. So he was moving through distances. He was obviously using a lot of his spinning attacks, especially to the body. Those were landing really well for him. But the point being is he was constantly able to hit, exit, hit, reset the angle, hit, roll underneath, almost like a boxer to a degree, although not with traditional boxing technique, but the same kind of principle that's involved where you hit roll under and now you're off angle. And Neal had a hard time following. In fact, I should say Neal had a hard time stopping that and ended up following, I should say, really the whole time. And that's just how it went. Now, I will say this. Neal was getting landed on for 25 full minutes and just still hung in there. He obviously has an incredible chin. He obviously is durable as hell. Remember, that right eye he probably couldn't see a whole lot out of. So, there was just he was up against it. He was up against it even if there was no cut. There was a real big, skill differential. But by, 20 minutes in, he's taking a pounding. He can't see out of his right eye, and he doesn't have an answer technically for any of this. It's just a really tough space to be in. I mean, if you ask, who beats Wonderboy and how do they do it, there's not exactly a through line in the UFC. Matt Brown did it early in his career, and that was typically on the ground. Okay. Pettis did it, but Pettis was getting chewed up and then kind of just Superman punched his way through distance when you could say that Wonderboy had maybe positionally overcommitted a little bit, but he was still getting tuned up before that. Okay. And then what about the Wonderboy fights? Excuse me, actually Wonderboy. The Woodley fights. Well, there was the draw the one time, and then Woodley won the second one. But Woodley dropped him in both fights. So what was the difference? If that's what you want to say is if Woodley has something approximating the blueprint, what would it be? Well, it'd be a few things. Woodley did not chase Wonderboy. Not much, really. Now, Woodley also had the benefit of fighting in the bigger cage, so maybe that played a role. But the big issue was Woodley let the fight come to him. Remember, Woodley would blitz a little bit at times. He would kind of corner at the beginning of rounds. But basically what Woodley did was he backed up against the fence and let Wonderboy come to him. But he had the threat of takedowns, and he did the Yoel Romero thing, where he wasn't trying to strike and defend at the same time. He's just watching to defend. So he could see what Woodley was doing, what Wonderboy was doing, when all he's really trying to do is defend. He could slip and get out of the way. He could cover and move, whatever he needed to do. So Wonderboy had a hard time getting through. The two times he got dropped in the first and second fights were off a right hand from Woodley, where in the first case, Wonderboy tried to double up on an attack. Woodley slipped off of the side and threw a right and crushed him with it. And in the second one, they exchanged punches. In the second one, you saw a jab from Wonderboy that Woodley slipped and then came over the top with a boxing. So if you could time him, which easier said than done, you could do it. In the case of Woodley, he's very good with that right hand. That was sort of prime Woodley. And also, if the fight is coming to you're going to have a better chance of reading it in the way that he did. And of course, he was able to get takedowns as well. So there was much more of a threat. So Wonderboy was kind of muted. He couldn't get going. He wasn't in a flow state. And because Woodley backed up, there was just in a little bit more of a observable position. I'm not telling you that's the way that everyone has to fight him, or that's the only way to fight him. I mean, there's a real good case to make. You see it in kickboxing all the time. How do guys handle these stick and move karate types? These guys who have the Dutch or Thai styles, they just chop their legs to a million pieces. And we're talking about kickboxers who are certainly as good, and in many cases much better in pure kickboxing than Wonderboy, right? So it's not like this is not a known thing. You just don't see a lot of it. But in MMA, maybe some of those guys don't have those skills. They don't have the ability to set up the shots. And obviously you're fighting in a ring versus a cage, and there can be some other differences. But it is somewhat unusual that we've not seen somebody really go after his legs. I mean, okay, getting it done is a lot easier said than done. But if Wonderboy can't move the way he's supposed to, he's a much easier guy to fight. It seems like that would be something that would have been a bigger focus. But you have to give credit to Wonderboy, man. At age 37, he still has all the pieces of his game right there. He did not look slower to me. He did not look like he had miles on him, at least not the kind that had really negatively impacted his game. This is a guy who he is as elusive as he needs to be. His timing is still there. His distance management is still there. His weapon selection is still great. I was surprised, like I said, he couldn't put Neal down. That, to me, was a little unusual. Either Neal is super tough, which I'm sure is true, or Wonderboy just didn't quite have the pop, or maybe he was just trying to touch and go. There's a lot of reasons why maybe it was that way, but there's not much to say a whole lot about the fight. I can pull up some of the numbers if you like here. These are unofficial because they're not quite. I think they retally them. Excuse me, afterwards. But this is from Fight Metrics. So here are Wonderboy's numbers. I mean, yeah, he was cruising, folks. In a 5-round contest, he had 171 strikes to Geoff Neal's 85. Now, that's more than Vicente Luque had when Luque fought Thompson, but that was in a 3-round contest. He had 2 more rounds. This is the numbers he was throwing per round if you're Geoff Neal. 7, 15, 15, 15, and then 33 when both of them opened up a little bit more in that 5th round. Let's look at the cases of the Woodley fight. And I know that there's that Thompson lost the Till fight, but there was nothing happening in that fight, so I'm not sure what lesson there is really to take. Yeah, I mean, listen to these numbers from Wonderboy against Woodley. This was at UFC 209, so this would be the rematch. He landed 6, 8, 14, 12, and 13. Really low numbers. In this fight, right, here's what Wonderboy landed per round. 25, 30, 33, 34, 49. In some cases, 3 or 4 times as much as what he was landing against Tyron Woodley. Woodley really kind of shut him down with some of his threats and the way he was just sort of watching. And then Wonderboy would throw something and he would blitz into him, or he would try to catch him with his own timing. If Wonderboy's in a groove and he can move, dude, it's a hard guy to fight, man. He is still very much a force in the UFC's welterweight division. Now, you look at the rankings and you say to yourself, where does this put Wonderboy? Well, as it currently stands, I'm looking at them live, he is sitting at 5. You've got Masvidal, Edwards, Burns, and Covington in front of him. Now, he already fought Masvidal in, 2018 and beat him handily. It was not close. You got Leon Edwards still sitting out there. I don't know if they're going to try and make that Khamzat Chimaev fight again. Burns has unfinished business. You could maybe do Colby, but Colby's kind of sitting at 1. I guess they want to see what happens between the winner of Burns and Usman. If you're Colby, you probably would turn that fight down. So I don't know. Do they run the fight back with Masvidal? Is that a thing that they want to do? I wouldn't mind seeing it, but it's hard to know. Chiesa's kind of out there, I guess. I'm not sure if Chiesa has a fight lined up, but you can see, man, he is still very much at the top of that division. He is still very much can't sleep on the guy. And you can see there are tiers to welterweight. Obviously not just by virtue of the numbers you can assign to someone through the rankings, but you can see there are guys who can deal with his pressure one way or the other. There are guys who can deal with his style of fighting, and there are just guys who can't. And tonight, anyway, we'll see what the future holds for the guy, but tonight, it just didn't work out for Geoff Neal. He has a lot of work to do, I think, there's just a level of sophistication to his footwork, to, I think, some of the strategy that just has to go up from where it is right now, as good as he is and as powerful as he is. So that's that. Okay, so what do you want to say about the co-main event? That's really interesting, huh? Your co-main event, Jose Aldo, who apparently had I thought it was real. I was even amazed. I was like, wow, that's a really well-colored tattoo, man. It's like deeply saturated purple. It turns out it's a fake tattoo. I wonder what's going to happen with that. I don't know what the story is behind that or what the UFC is going to do and maybe fine him. Who knows? But neither here nor there. Let's just state what it was. Now, the scores... I was trying to take notes and stuff, so I may have missed some stuff. But the story is this. It's 29-28 across the board for Jose Aldo. I thought it was 30-27. I must have missed something. I'm not sure what I missed. But either way, the story is this. Jose Aldo looked fantastic. I mean, he looked great. He looked so good. He is only 34 years. Now, that's a long time in terms of miles. Not so much age, obviously. We just talked about Wonderboy being 37, nearly 38. But you got to give credit to Jose Aldo. He snaps a 3-fight losing streak. I know some people thought he beat Marlon Moraes, but still, he snaps a 3-fight losing streak. First of all, second of all, he did almost everything he wanted to. Tons of leg kicks. Aldo brought those back. I mean, not a huge amount, but noticeably there. Okay, his left hand to the liver was a thing of joy. I mean, he was lighting Chito up with that, including follow-up rights. A lot of times Chito would cover like this, where he can't see, and his face is all covered. And when his hands are occupied like that, Aldo would do that, or Aldo would do it and then launch into a left hand, right leg kick at the same or in combination. He was running away with it. His jab was there. His takedown defense was there. His back taking was there. I wrote this on Twitter. Folks don't realize this. there's tons of caveats here because it was at brown belt. But at brown belt, Jose Aldo has wins over Cobrinha. Cobrinha after brown belt, at black belt, when Jose stopped competing in pure jiu-jitsu and then, went into MMA, and then Cobrinha went on to pure jiu-jitsu. Cobrinha is one of the best black belts ever. And his, main nemesis, one of the Mendez brothers, if it's not Cobrinha, it's him. Like, talking about one of the all-time greatest black belts ever. And through brown belt, Aldo was better than him. It's crazy how good, and well-rounded it is. And you just never see some of these skills because they just, they don't appear to be relevant. But his takedown defense is amazing. His clinch breaking was on point. He looked to be in tremendous condition. His cardio didn't drop off. And I think, by the way, I can't say this for sure, obviously, but it also looks to me like his ability to make 135 is getting a little bit smoother. He looked really sucked out in his first fight there. In his second fight against Peter Yan, he looked better. He looked crazy muscular for this one. As I mentioned, cardio totally on point, strategy on point, didn't take hardly any big shots, threw almost whatever he wanted. Chito Vera, you got to give him credit. I mean, this is a guy that took John Lineker's best punch and never folded. I mean, never folded. So you knew he was going to be there. That's a hard guy to hurt, man. Chito is a tough, salt of the earth kind of person. So unless Aldo really did something special, this fight was going to go the distance, and it did. But it just goes to show, man, and I talk about it all the time on the live chat. I talk about it all the time on MK, on my personal channel. You have to be very careful before you bury a fighter in MMA who is on a losing streak or is getting kind of old and maybe isn't the same as they used to be. Maybe you have a reason to doubt exactly what they can do. But you got to be careful about burying them because Jose Aldo had those two. Well, he had the Conor McGregor fight, but then he had the two really tough losses to Max where he just had these brutal stoppages. He exits the division. Well, he has a couple more wins, but then he exits the division, right? Because there was just no hope for him to get a title shot again. I think even in the Stevens fight, he got rocked a little bit, right? Then he goes down to, fought Volkanovski, and there was just no hope because he just couldn't do anything to Volkanovski. So he goes down to fight Marlon, and he did better than you thought he did. And then he goes down to fight, or stays down, I should say, to fight Peter Yan. And remember, he was competitive in the Yan fight, but dude, that was a brutally late stoppage. So let me get this straight. You had the two devastating losses to Max. You had the loss to Conor. It wasn't a beating or anything, but you just couldn't get going against Alex. You beat Jeremy Stevens, but there was some dicey moments in there. You go down, you lose two in a row, including the last one being a really bad late stoppage from Leon Roberts, who's ordinarily quite a good ref, but I don't think did all that well this time. And then you come out here and you look just this good against Marlon Vera. And then, did you see who he calls out? He calls out T.J. Dillashaw. Dude, I mean, Jose Aldo is impressive. It really was, I was just watching his style. There's not a lot of stance switching going on in there. There's a little bit of feinting in his own way, but if you notice the guys who come up to MMA these days and sort of are making their way through the UFC, they have a little bit more of a modern style. And that style has its benefits and it has its downsides, but it's slightly more modern relative to what you saw 10 or 15 years ago. Aldo's style is still kind of tied a little bit to the past. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still tremendous, but it's, does he do some of the things that younger, more modern fighters, or I should say fighters who incorporate more modern sensibilities do? No, not necessarily. On the other hand, it doesn't matter because if you're as good at implementing that style as Jose Aldo is, if you are that athletic and you are that well-rounded and you are that dialed in, dude, you can do pretty incredible things. And that's exactly what you saw tonight. That was a great performance from Jose Aldo, vintage. He really is still a dynamic force. I don't know if he can win a title in this weight class, but I guess we have to kind of see how it shakes out. Certainly he can tell you he's better than a lot of the rising contenders. Chito Vera was sitting, where was he in this whole equation? So Chito was sitting at, 15. Okay, so, let's not oversell it greatly, and plus we had Rob Font to have a great win on this. So Aldo still has some work to do, but Frankie is sitting at 5. He's got a fight against Sandhagen coming up. You have to imagine you'd still like Aldo's chances against Edgar. So maybe it was a case Where Aldo, I still don't know if he can win a title at this weight class. In fact, I doubt it, but I don't know that. I doubt it, but he still might be able to beat really good fighters along the way. Hell, and depending who captures the title, maybe he could still get it. Again, we got to be careful about riding guys off. Pretty amazing job from Jose Aldo. If you're a Jose Aldo fan, this has been one of the best nights in a long time for him. He had some good moments there at the end of featherweight before the Volkanovski fight, but in terms of just win, new weight class, do you really have hope for the future? I mean, you got all of that here. This was a phenomenal job. So if you look at some of the numbers, which you guys know I love to do, if you look at some of these numbers here, it was close in overall numeric totals. In numeric, you had 44 of 70 land for Aldo in terms of significant strikes, then 46 of 82 for Marlon Vera. 19-16, Aldo versus Vera in the first, 24-28. Vera had a little bit busier in the second. I guess that's the round he took. And then the round 3, just 1 versus 2. But you'll recall that is where Aldo had the back for a long portion of the time with a control of 4 minutes and 53 seconds. I mean, that is a significant amount of control. And so, obviously, Vera had a little bit more control in the second round. And so I guess that's the one he took. Again, I wasn't paying the closest attention to that frame, so I apologize. But nevertheless, the lesson is fairly clear here. He is, has he proven to be as dominant at bantamweight as Wonderboy just proved to be at welterweight? No. That wasn't exactly what this proved. But it does prove that there's another level up that Jose Aldo is entitled to in terms of bantamweight fights. You might like his chances there. You can see he still has plenty of athletics, plenty of speed, plenty of athletic wherewithal, good reflexes. He can still make good reads. He has hard, potent weapons. He's something special. He really is something special. It was quite nice to see the King of Rio get his hand raised in the way that he did, given everything he's been up against all these years. And, reinvention's not easy, man. Changing weight classes is not easy. It's an instant kind of, media boost, given the way in which you might think about it. But the reality can sometimes be quite difficult. Some people take to it right away, okay, but a lot never take to it. And he has kind of stuck it out and figured out a way to, make it work for him. And you just kind of have to tip your hat to the guy. It's pretty impressive. So a great win for him. Where I'll put him in the rankings, where does he sit currently? Very quickly, as we look at these numbers now, Jose Aldo was sitting at 7. I don't know if this will meaningfully move him around. People in his orbit, you have Jimmy Rivera, Rafael Sunsel, Pedro Munoz. Again, Frankie is above him, but Frankie's fighting Corey Sandhagen. Then you got Cody, but Cody might go down. Marlon is maybe a fight they might do again, although Marlon looked really bad tonight, for most of it anyway. Well, for the parts that weren't wrestling. We'll talk about that on Monday. I don't know. TJ Dillashaw seems to be the fight that they should make. I mean, TJ coming back against a name like this, you have to wonder what does he look like after 2 years. Aldo, you can see, is pretty much like the quintessential great test for fighters who want to do something special at 135 pounds. I mean, Jan beat him, but that was a tough fight, That'll be a fun thing to do if they can make that. So we'll have to see. All right? Great night. Great year for the UFC. It started out great and then got a little rocky when the pandemic hit, but they ironed out those problems and pretty quickly, and then they were off to the races. They had a lot of really important, big, successful, entertaining fights this year. There was a lot more that happened on this card. We'll get to it on Monday. There's a lot that happened for them in 2020. We'll talk about that on Monday. Plus, folks may not realize this, your next UFC card is not until January 16th, so we got some downtime to consider some of this stuff. But for tonight, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson looked phenomenal. Jose Aldo looked very, very good. The best he's looked in quite some time. Certainly the best he's ever looked, I think, at bantamweight, you could say, in terms of just sort of a complete performance. So there you have it. All right? Give the video a thumbs up. Hit subscribe. Morning Kombat, 11 a.m. in the East Coast time, live on Monday. Of course, it's also on Wednesday and Friday. Brian Campbell will join you tonight for a reaction to Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith. Yeah? All right. So until Monday, thank you guys so much for watching. See you all then.